Last time, we found something surprising about memory. We learned that memory does not face backward the way we always assumed. It faces forward. The brain does not keep a record of your past for its own sake. It keeps a softened, edited residue of everything that has happened to you so that it can do the one thing that actually matters for survival. Imagine what comes next. We saw that the same machinery you use to remember a past birthday is the machinery you use to picture a birthday that has not yet happened. Memory hands the pieces to imagination, and imagination builds a future out of them. We left that idea sitting there, almost finished, but with a question hanging off the end of it. If imagination is constantly at work, assembling the past into possible futures, then when does it do this work? When does the mind actually build? Not, it turns out, when you are concentrating. Not when you are focused, busy, locked onto a task. The mind does its deepest building at the strangest time of all. It builds when you are doing nothing. Tonight we are going to follow that into one of the most counterintuitive truths about the human mind. We treat hard, focused effort as the source of our best ideas. We sit down, we bear down, we try to force the thought to come. And again, it refuses. Then we give up. We walk away. We take a shower, go for a walk, stare out a window. And there, in the moment we stopped trying, the idea arrives. This is not an accident, and it is not laziness. It is how the mind is built. The wandering mind, the drifting, unfocused, daydreaming mind that we are taught to be ashamed of, is not the mind switched off. It is the mind doing some of its most important work. And it is exactly that wandering, idle, empty time that the machines in our pockets have quietly begun to erase. To understand what we are losing, we first have to understand what the brain is doing in those empty moments. Because for most of the history of science, we assumed it was doing nothing at all. For a long time, brain scientists studied the mind the way you might study a tool. You give it a job, you watch which parts light up, and you learn what those parts are for. Show someone a face, watch the face region activate. Ask them to move a hand, watch the movement region fire. The brain in this picture was a machine that switched on to do tasks and switched off when the task was done. But to run these experiments, scientists needed a baseline. They needed to know what the brain looked like when it was not doing the task, so they could measure the difference. So they asked people to lie still in the scanner and rest. Do nothing. Let the mind idle. This resting state was supposed to be the quiet background, the blank page against which the real activity would stand out. And then, a little over 20 years ago, a researcher named Marcus Raichle noticed something that should have been impossible. The resting brain was not quiet at all. When people stopped focusing on any task and let their minds drift, a specific, organized network of regions did not power down. It powered up. A whole constellation of the brain switched on precisely when the person stopped trying to do anything. And it was not a faint flicker. It was a roar. This network consumed enormous amounts of energy, as much as the brain ever used for any deliberate task, sometimes more. Raichle gave it a name. He called it the default mode network, because it was the mode the brain fell into by default, the thing it did whenever it was released from the outside world. And he gave the activity itself a striking name. He called it the brain's dark energy, borrowing a term from physics for the vast, unseen force that makes up most of the universe while escaping our notice entirely. Because that is what this turned out to be. Your brain uses about a fifth of all the energy your body burns, and it burns most of it not on the tasks in front of you, but on this constant, churning inner activity that has almost nothing to do with the outside world. The focused, task-driven thinking we prize, the part we call paying attention, sits on top of this like a few small waves on a deep ocean. Most of what your brain does, it does inward, in the dark, when you are not looking. At first, many scientists assumed this background activity was meaningless. Noise, the idle hum of a machine left running, with no more significance than the warmth of an engine at rest. But the more closely they looked, the less it resembled noise. The same regions activated together in the same coordinated way, in person after person, with a consistency that random hum could never produce. This was not the brain spinning its wheels. It was the brain running a program, a deliberate, organized, energy-hungry program that switched on the instant the outside world stopped making demands. And the regions involved were telling. They were the parts of the brain tied to memory, to imagining, to thinking about yourself and about other people. In other words, the moment you stop attending to the world, your brain does not rest. It turns to face inward, toward your own life, and begins to work on it. So when you catch yourself staring out the window, mind drifting, doing nothing, you are not idling. You have simply handed the controls to the part of your brain that runs the deepest, and that part has somewhere it wants to go. Before we follow it there, let us look at what it produces, because the evidence for it is scattered across the history of human discovery in a pattern that, once you see it, you cannot unsee. There is a story almost everyone has heard, even if they do not know where it comes from. A man is asked to solve a problem he cannot crack. He works at it, struggles, gets nowhere. Then he gives up for the day and climbs into his bath, and as he sinks into the water and watches it rise around him, the answer arrives, whole and certain, with such force that he leaps up and runs through the streets shouting a single word: "I have found it." Whether or not it happened exactly that way, the story has survived for over 2,000 years for a reason. Everyone recognizes the shape of it. The answer would not come while he reached for it. It came the moment he let go. The history of human thought is full of this same shape, told by the people who lived it. One of the greatest mathematicians of his age describes struggling for weeks with a problem, getting nowhere, then setting it aside to take a trip. And as he stepped onto a bus, thinking of nothing in particular, the solution arrived in his mind, fully formed, with no apparent effort, in a moment that had nothing to do with mathematics at all. A famous chemist describes searching in vain for the structure of a molecule until the answer appeared to him in a daydream by the fire, an image of a snake seizing its own tail, which turned out to be the shape he had been hunting. We tell these stories as though they are about genius. They are really about something stranger and more universal. In every one of them, the breakthrough did not come during the hard, focused work. It came afterward, in the gap, when the person had stopped trying and let the mind wander. The bath, the bus, the fire, different details, identical pattern. You have lived this yourself, even if never with a great discovery. The name you could not remember, which surfaced the instant you stopped chasing it and thought about something else. The right thing to say in an argument, which arrived hours too late, in the shower. The solution to a problem at work that came not at your desk, but on the walk home. We have all felt it. The harder we grip, the more the answer hides. We loosen our grip, and it appears. There is a particular frustration we all know of a word sitting just out of reach, on the tip of the tongue, refusing to come no matter how hard you strain for it. And there is the particular relief of that same word arriving on its own, 10 minutes later, when you have given up and moved on, delivered to you by a mind that apparently never stopped searching even though you did. That small, ordinary experience is the whole principle in miniature. The conscious, effortful you let go. The deeper, wandering mind kept working, out of sight, and handed up the answer when it was ready, not when you demanded it. For most of history, this was just folklore, a charming quirk of how minds work. But in the last few decades, scientists have taken this quirk into the laboratory and shown that it is real and measurable, and that it has a mechanism. They gave it a name, too. They call it incubation. And what they found about it changes how you should think about every blank moment in your day. Here is one of the experiments, and it is worth following closely because it pins down something we usually only feel. Researchers gave people a classic test of creative thinking. You take an everyday object, a brick, a paperclip, and you list as many unusual uses for it as you can. It measures the mind's ability to range widely, to make distant connections, to generate the unexpected. The participants worked at it, and then the researchers interrupted them partway through and gave everyone a break before the final round. But the breaks were not all the same. Some people simply rested. Some got no break at all. And one group was given something specific to do during their break. A dull, undemanding little task, easy enough that it occupied the hands and the surface of the mind while leaving the deeper mind free to drift. The kind of task that bores you just enough to send your thoughts wandering elsewhere. Then everyone returned to the creativity test. And the group that had done the dull, mind-wandering task came back transformed. They generated significantly more creative answers than any other group. More than the people who rested, more than the people who pushed straight through. The boring task, the one that set their minds adrift, had quietly improved their thinking on a problem they were not even consciously working on. Sit with what that means. While their attention was occupied with something trivial, some part of their mind kept turning the original problem over, in the background, out of sight, and handed back a better answer than focused effort had produced. The wandering was not a pause in the work. It was a different kind of work, running underneath, in the dark, in exactly the network we met a moment ago. This is incubation, and it overturns something we believe about effort. We assume that to solve a hard problem, you must keep your attention nailed to it. Bear down harder, concentrate longer. But concentration has a narrowing effect. It locks you onto the path you are already on, the obvious approach, the first idea, and it makes it very hard to see the path you are not on. Focus is a spotlight. It shows you one bright circle and hides everything outside it. The wandering mind does the opposite. Released from the spotlight, it roams. It wanders into the dark corners of memory and knowledge that focus kept hidden, and it brings distant things together. The snake and the molecule, the bath and the buoyant body. Connections that no amount of grinding effort would have found, because grinding effort was looking in the wrong place. The breakthrough was never going to come from looking harder. It was always going to come from looking away. You can feel the difference in your own head if you watch for it. When you concentrate hard on a problem, notice how your thinking tightens, circles, returns over and over to the same few moves, the same dead ends, like a key turning in a lock that will not open. The harder you press, the more fixed you become on the approach that is already failing. This is the trap of focus. It is wonderful for executing a plan you already have, and quietly terrible for finding a plan you do not. Locked onto the obvious, it cannot see the unobvious, because the unobvious lives outside the circle of the spotlight. In the dark, the spotlight creates. And then you walk away, and the lock turns. Not because you tried harder, but because you stopped. The moment your focus releases, the wandering mind floods into all the territory that focus had walled off, and somewhere out there it finds the peace you needed, the one that was never going to be on the narrow path you kept pacing. The answer was always in the dark. You just had to stop shining the light in one place long enough to see it. Which means that stepping back from a problem is not quitting it. Done right, it is one of the most powerful ways of solving it. And the same is true of an even humbler state, one we spend our whole lives trying to escape. We treat boredom as an emergency. The moment it arrives, the empty minute in a waiting room, the lull in a conversation, the dead time standing in a line, we reach automatically for something to fill it. And we have never in history had so much within reach. A glowing rectangle in every pocket, holding an endless supply of things to watch and read and scroll, perfectly designed to ensure that you never have to be bored for even a second again. This feels like pure progress. Boredom is unpleasant. Why would anyone want it? But researchers have begun to ask what boredom is actually for. And the answer suggests we may be throwing away something we do not understand. In one study, researchers deliberately bored people. They had them do something genuinely tedious, copying numbers out of a phone directory, the kind of dreary task that makes the mind beg for escape. Then they gave those bored people a creativity test, the same kind of open-ended challenge, come up with uses for an ordinary object. And the bored participants outperformed the unbored ones. Being bored first made people more creative afterward. Because boredom, it turns out, is not an empty state. It is a restless one. It is the specific, slightly uncomfortable feeling your mind produces when it is underused. And that discomfort has a purpose. It is a pressure, a push, a signal that says, there is unused capacity here. Go find something to do with it. Left alone, with nothing fed to it from outside, the bored mind turns inward and starts generating. It daydreams, it wonders, it invents, it plans. Boredom is the launch pad for the wandering mind, the doorway through which idle time becomes imagination. Every child knows this, or used to. The long, empty afternoon with nothing to do, which felt unbearable for 10 minutes, and then, if no one rescued you from it, bloomed into a game, a story, a whole world invented out of the boredom itself. That blooming is the default mode network coming online, taking the empty time and making something from it. Boredom was never the enemy of imagination. Boredom was its raw material. But there is a catch, and it is the heart of the matter. Boredom only blooms if you stay in it long enough. The discomfort comes first, and the invention comes later, and between them is a gap you have to be willing to sit through. In the old world, you often had no choice. Stuck in the long afternoon, the waiting room, the slow train, you had no way to escape the boredom, so you passed through it and out the other side, into the daydreaming and the inventing that lay beyond. The discomfort was a toll gate, and on the far side was the open country of the wandering mind. Now the toll gate has a bypass. The instant boredom appears, the very first prickle of it, you reach for the glowing rectangle and the feeling is gone.
replaced in a half-second by something bright and engaging and effortless. You never have to sit through the discomfort, which sounds like a mercy. But because you never sit through it, you never reach what lies beyond it. You escape the boredom, and in escaping it, you also escape everything boredom was about to give you. You stop at the toll gate, turn around, and never see the country on the other side. And here is the quiet tragedy hidden in our endless feeds. By making sure we are never bored, we may be making sure we never reach the state where the mind begins to generate on its own. We have solved boredom, and in solving it, we may have switched off the very engine boredom exists to start. To see why that matters so much, we have to follow the wandering mind to the place it actually goes when you finally let it loose. When researchers studied what people's minds actually do when they wander, they found that the drifting is not random. Set a mind free, and it does not scatter into meaningless noise. It travels with a strange and consistent purpose. Most of all, it travels into the future. Left to wander, your mind spends a remarkable amount of its time running ahead of you, rehearsing conversations you have not had yet, imagining situations that have not arrived, planning, preparing, simulating what might come. It also wanders into the lives of other people, turning over what someone meant, how a friend is doing, what another person might be feeling. And it circles, again and again, around the question of who you are, replaying your own story, weighing your choices, knitting your scattered days into something that feels like a single, continuous self. You may recognize this network. It is the same one we met last time. The default mode network, the home of the wandering mind, overlaps almost exactly with the system the brain uses to remember your past and imagine your future. This is not a coincidence. It is the whole point. When your mind wanders, it is running the same forward-facing machinery we discovered in memory, taking the softened residue of everything you have lived and using it to build, again and again, a model of what is coming and who you are becoming.
Think of the last time you took a long drive alone, or a shower, or lay awake in the dark before sleep. Notice where your mind went, with no one steering it. It probably drifted to a conversation you need to have and rehearsed it. It probably circled back to something someone said and turned it over, trying to read what they meant. It probably ran ahead to tomorrow or next week, sketching how things might go. And somewhere in there, it almost certainly returned to you, to some choice you made, some worry you carry, some sense of where your life is heading. That drifting was not idleness. That was your mind doing the quiet, constant labor of staying oriented in time, of knowing where you have been and where you are going and who is doing the going. So the wandering mind is not killing time. It is doing the deep background work of being a person. It is where you process what has happened to you. It is where you prepare for what is not. It is where loose experiences get connected into understanding, where problems quietly incubate, where the raw material of your life gets turned into plans and insights and a coherent sense of self. None of this work announces itself. It happens in the dark, in the gaps, in the moments that look, from the outside, like you are doing nothing at all. This is why the empty time matters so much more than it appears to. The blank moments are not the spaces between the important things. For a great deal of your inner life, the blank moments are where the important things happen. The walk where you finally understand how you feel. The shower where the plan comes together. The long stare out the train window where a worry quietly resolves itself without your ever deciding to solve it. Take those moments away, and you do not simply lose some idle time. You lose the room in which the mind does its becoming. And those moments are precisely the ones we have spent the last 2 decades learning to abolish. There is an experiment that, once you hear it, is hard to forget. Researchers asked people to do something that sounds almost absurdly simple. Sit alone in a bare room with nothing to do, nothing to look at, no phone, no book, no distraction, and simply be alone with their own thoughts for a few minutes. Just think. That was the entire task. People hated it. They found it genuinely difficult, even distressing, to sit quietly with their own minds for as little as 6 to 15 minutes. But the experiment had a darker twist. In the room was a device that would deliver a small, unpleasant electric shock. The same people had earlier said they would pay money to avoid being shocked. And yet, left alone with nothing but their thoughts, a striking number of them chose to shock themselves rather than sit in the silence. They would rather feel pain than feel nothing. They would rather be hurt than be bored. That study was run before the modern feed reached its full power, before the algorithmic scroll, before the endless autoplay, before an intelligent machine sat ready in every pocket to answer any question and fill any gap. We have spent the years since then engineering away every last scrap of empty time. The line at the store, the wait for the bus, the lull before sleep, the pause in the conversation, all of it now instantly fillable, and so, almost always, filled. The blank moment has become nearly extinct. And now there is a new fill for the gaps, more total than any before it. When a question rises in your mind, you no longer have to sit with it, turn it over, let it incubate on a walk. You can hand it across instantly and receive an answer in seconds. When you face a problem, you no longer have to step away and let the wandering mind work it in the dark. The machine will simply produce the solution before the incubation could ever begin. This is the subtlest cost yet, and the hardest to notice, because it does not feel like a loss at all. It feels like help. The danger here is not that the machine thinks for you, exactly. It is that the machine removes the empty time in which you would have thought. It fills the bath. It boards the bus before you do. It answers the question before the question has the chance to wander off into the dark and come back transformed. Every gap it helpfully fills is a gap where your own mind would have gone to work, and now will not. Picture how it used to go. You had a problem you could not solve, and because there was no instant answer, you were forced to live with it. You carried the unsolved question around for an afternoon, a day, a week. It sat in the back of your mind, half forgotten, while the wandering network turned it over in the dark. And then, on a walk, in the shower, in a quiet moment, it resolved itself, and the answer felt like yours, because in a real sense, it was. The waiting was not wasted. The waiting was the work. Now picture how it goes today. You hit the same problem, and within seconds you have handed it across and received a clean, confident answer. The problem never gets the chance to lodge in your mind. It never incubates, because it never has to. You are spared the discomfort of not knowing, and along with that discomfort, you are spared the slow, invisible process that would have turned the not knowing into an insight of your own. You got the answer. You skipped the becoming. We are not losing the ability to think. We are losing the blank spaces where thinking is born. And a mind that is never allowed to be empty is a mind that is never allowed to generate. Which leaves us with one last thing worth holding on to, as the noise rises and the gaps disappear. So we arrive where this episode has been heading. We began with a paradox. The best ideas refuse to come when we reach for them, and arrive when we let go. And we found that this is not a quirk, but a design. Beneath your focused, task-driven attention runs a deeper network, awake in every idle moment, burning most of your brain's energy in the dark. It is the source of incubation, the reason a problem solves itself on a walk. It is what boredom exists to start. And it is the same forward-facing machinery that turns your past into your future and your days into a self. The wandering mind is not the mind wasted. It is the mind at its most quietly essential. None of this makes the machine an enemy. The instant answer is a genuine gift, as the notebook was, as the book was. There is no wisdom in refusing it, and no virtue in being bored for its own sake. The danger was never in having the tool. The danger is in letting it fill every last gap, until there is no empty time left anywhere in a life, no walk without a voice in your ears, no problem you sit with before handing it over, no boredom long enough to bloom into anything. The danger is a mind so constantly fed from the outside that it forgets how to generate from within. So here is the single thing worth carrying out of tonight, and you can hold it lightly. Keep some gaps empty. Not all of them. You do not have to renounce the feed or the answer or the endless library in your pocket. Just keep a few of the blank spaces blank. Take the walk without the podcast now and then, and let your mind go where it wants. Stand in the line and stare at nothing instead of reaching for the glass. Sit with the hard problem for an hour before you hand it to the machine.